Hi everyone, welcome back to channel that shares knowledge on comprehensive personal development through good books. This week, we invite you to listen to a sharing by Better Version called Where the Next Flower Will Bloom. The flower blooms, we meet Buddha, through the book Flowers Continue to Bloom by the Venerable Tibetan Master Khenpo Tsultrim Gyaltso Rinpoche. Buddha Shakyamuni taught that all sentient beings have Buddha nature, which is neither born nor dies, no increase, no decrease. We all have the Buddha mind. All doubts, troubles, and sufferings you encounter in life can be enlightened by the philosophy of Buddhism. Flowers Continue to Bloom is a book that can help you get closer to the Buddha. The author of this book is His Holiness Khenpo Tsultrim Gyaltso Rinpoche, the revered master of the Dai Vien Ma lineage, and an influential teacher to millions of people. He is also a direct disciple of the late greatest monk of the Tibetan Buddhism sect, Karma Chagmi Rinpoche, founder of Larang Gar, the world's largest Tibetan Buddhist institute. This book is rated in the top 100 books to read on Amazon, with an English translation titled The Path, A Guide to Happiness. The original Chinese title is temporarily translated as Flowers Continue to Bloom. From the beginning, when hearing this title, I was extremely attracted. Flowers continue to bloom means that flowers will bloom sequentially, in a certain order. In nature, all things have their own law of cause and effect. According to that law, in spring, peach blossoms bloom, in summer, lotuses are radiant, in autumn, yellow chrysanthemums are everywhere, and in winter, sunflowers stand proudly. In life, it's the same, each period we have our own missions. When following the flow of luck, you will automatically see what you inherently need to see. With beautiful, gentle, easy-to-understand language, along with a modern way of thinking and expression, the wisdom in this book is not only for Buddhists, but also suitable for all ordinary people. Reading it, you will realize that life is a journey of experience, practicing walking and enlightenment at the same time. But if you are still busy in the whirlwind of life, without focusing on realizing this, if you still have many worries, sadness, and hesitations, you can completely calm down with this book to apply profound philosophies into your daily life to help you get rid of insecurity and reshape your inner world, and then you will realize that, in the next place, the flower will bloom. Where the flower blooms, you will see Buddha and awaken on every step. Okay, now let's all go into this book together and see what each of us needs to awaken and practice, what wisdom and peace of mind we need to learn. Please listen to the content I will share today. Enlightened suffering. Why haven't you really ended suffering? Suffering. What are the three major types of suffering? After the Buddha's enlightenment, he did not teach any profound dharma, but only taught the Four Noble Truths, including the noble truth of suffering, the truth of the origin of suffering, the truth of the cessation of suffering, and the noble truth of the path. In it, the noble truth of suffering refers to the realization of the fact that suffering is an objective existence and cannot be avoided. The truth of the origin of suffering analyzes the causes that lead to suffering. And the truth of the cessation of suffering and the truth of the path talks about how to end suffering. Perhaps many people still acknowledge that this life is a sea of suffering, but we may not have a complete understanding of the nature of suffering. In the Buddhist scriptures, suffering has been divided into three types: suffering from change, and the suffering from conditioning. So what is suffering from suffering? When there are pains that are most clearly displayed, such as physical and mental injuries, illness, fear, loss, death, family members being hospitalized, failed businesses, children not listening, and so on. These are all called the first type of suffering, suffering from suffering. Simply put, this is the suffering that people encounter and will exclaim, "Why am I suffering like this? Why am I so unlucky?" The second type of suffering is the suffering of change. That is, experiences that we initially think are joyful, but because their hidden nature is still suffering, they eventually turn from joy into suffering. For example, when two people are together they will have happy times, but breaking up is sure to be painful. Or, one day, one of the two people will have to say goodbye to this life. This is also the suffering of separation between life and death that everyone will have to face. Or, when we eat delicious food, satisfying our taste buds, but then, if you eat uncontrollably, you will be full of illness. Or sleeping in, feeling good when you play games for a while, you will feel refreshed, but in the long run it will harm the body, etc. These are all called suffering of change. If there is no happiness before, there will be no pain after. Therefore, if we think carefully, we will see that all happiness in life conceals suffering in the future. Finally, the suffering from conditioning is a more severe kind of suffering. It is the pain that comes from the helplessness and dissatisfaction with the entire state of existence, being trapped in the cycle of reincarnation. Everything in the world is always changing, but the human mind cannot accept this law. Humans are always obsessed with pursuing eternity, hoping for an eternal career, eternal love, and eternal happiness. However, everything in life is not as expected, so all kinds of suffering will arise from here. From these three types of suffering, we will see that the life of an ordinary person must certainly walk with suffering and also end with suffering. All these things are not decided by ourselves. More specifically, in the human realm, there are 8 types of suffering. Whether rich or poor, strong or weak, all of us have to go through 4 pains: birth, aging, sickness, and death. Almost all of us know these 4 pains, but there are 4 other types of suffering that people pay less attention to. These are the suffering of meeting with what is hated, the suffering of separation from what is loved, the suffering of not getting what is desired, and the suffering of unwanted things happening. The suffering of meeting with what is hated is the suffering of resentment when things go against one's wishes. For example, when we do something that we are forced to do, not as we want. The suffering of separation from what is loved is the pain from the separation of birth and death forever. For example, one day, we will never see the people we love in this world again, or the sadness of having to break up when you are still deeply in love. The suffering of not getting what is desired is when you don't achieve what you want. For example, even though you have given your all to someone, that person still doesn't love you, devoting all your heart and soul to your work, but in the end, still failing. The last suffering is the suffering of unwanted things happening, that is, even when we realize those sufferings, and are determined not to let ourselves fall into them, they will still come naturally. And this is all the suffering that a normal person living in the world will have to face. As long as life exists, suffering will definitely still happen. So, why do we have to learn to fully recognize suffering, to accept that, no matter what, suffering will always exist? What is the purpose? The author says that recognizing the universality of suffering may sound negative and pessimistic, but in reality it is not like that. Because we always have the habit of considering suffering as a manifestation of failure, so we will try to avoid it, or with the thought that if we just make everything okay again, we will stop suffering. Along with that, at all costs, we look for ways to overcome. Doing so may temporarily help you reduce anxiety and fear, but in reality it does not solve the core of the problem. When failure continues to occur, you are once again discouraged, suffer, and even fall into a state of resentment towards fate, and keep living in this cycle for the rest of your life. In fact, you need to know that if you only face the surface of suffering, you have never escaped from suffering. The Buddha preached about the truth of suffering so that you can truly achieve happiness through a deep and comprehensive understanding of suffering, so that when pain has not yet come, you will not worry, you will not fear. When the pain is happening, you will not easily collapse. And when the pain has passed, you will also not live in obsession and reproach. Because when you are enlightened, you will know that as long as there is a body, it will certainly get old, get sick, and die. As long as there is greed, anger, and ignorance, there will definitely be pain. Therefore, to solve suffering, the first step is to accept the objective reality that we will not be able to avoid suffering. The second step is that we need to understand the root cause of suffering. Buddhism believes that the root of all suffering and reincarnation lies in ego clinging, that is, a deep-rooted misunderstanding about ourselves and the outside world. We believe that illusion is reality. What is the illusion here? It's that you believe that you and the outside world exist in an absolutely consistent way, without having to observe based on conditions. It is an excessive obsession with one's own existence, leading to the separation of the individual from their true self. We believe and cling to the individual. The individual here is your physical body. We also believe and cling to all the causes and conditions we encounter. Everything in the world that we have is real. From there, ignorance and illusion arise, because the more you believe, the more you will fear losing, the more you want to have, the more you will cling to this material world. From that comes all kinds of desires and cravings, and in the end you have to bear the suffering. That attachment and feeling, thoughts, and ideas about oneself is called ego clinging in Buddhism. All things do not exist as solidly as we think, but they depend on many different conditions from the inside out, constantly arising and disappearing, without any inherent or permanent nature. In the words of the Buddha, this means that everything is truly impermanent and egoless. Impermanence is not an invention of the Buddha, but a natural truth that everyone ignores. Only by understanding that all things are impermanent and inherently egoless can you then let go of ego clinging, which also means eliminating all suffering at the root. So what is impermanence? We see that winter passes, spring comes, the moon waxes and wanes, joy, anger, love and hate, all things have birth and death, coming and going. Simply put, impermanence is a universal characteristic of all things. Everything cannot exist forever, constantly arising and disappearing, and always changing. We humans suffer because we are always pursuing the beauty of eternity, status, fame, money, conditional joys, lasting relationships, being solid and growing strong. And it is unfortunate that people will only realize impermanence when they have no other choice, for example when facing illness, separation, or misfortune. It is because of this that most people often mistakenly think that impermanence itself is the cause of suffering, so they try to pursue what they think is the opposite of change, which is safety and stability. But in fact, it is not impermanence that causes suffering, but it is the fear of impermanence that creates suffering for you. Perhaps many people have experienced similar things. The more afraid of something, the more they don't want to look at it, the more they don't want to look, the more afraid they become. This is how people are facing impermanence. Now, if you can turn around and look directly at this natural truth, you will see that impermanence is not as scary as you think. If there is no impermanence, there will be no change. If there is no impermanence, the sun will not rise after setting, two people separated will not be able to meet, a serious illness cannot be recovered, a depressed mood cannot cheer up, failure cannot be recovered, and so on. Just like in the book Right View that I shared before, it says that we should not only look at one side of impermanence, as suffering, and don't use dualistic thinking to think that joy and suffering are opposites. Joy is something to be held onto, while suffering is something that shouldn't exist. Now, this book once again confirms to you that you should learn to calmly recognize all the changes of life. At any time, recognize suffering comprehensively and become familiar with impermanence. Only in this way will your soul truly be relaxed, open, and appreciate life. Next is another extremely important philosophy of practice, egolessness. Like impermanence, egolessness is just a universal characteristic of all things. In itself, it is neither good nor bad. Egolessness means that things, including ourselves, do not have absolute self-nature. For example, when you lose weight, if you consider this body as me, then the part of me that is lost when you lose weight, where will it go? After losing weight, will I still be me? Whether your body is fat or thin, healthy or weak, it is always changing when external conditions and internal components change. Because everything is always changing, therefore, there is no real self. From this, we can see that considering our body as me is actually just an illusion. Some people also wonder, so, this body is not the real me, but my spirit must be me, right? If the body is constantly changing, then the feelings, thoughts, and different consciousnesses of humans also cannot be constant. If the body is not me, then the spirit that changes from moment to moment is even less likely to be me. In short, you will realize that egolessness means there is never an unchanging me, there is no independent and eternal reality. The body and mind of any living thing are constantly changing. People are egoless. Things are also egoless. So, what is the purpose of understanding impermanence and egolessness? The author says that hearing the philosophy of impermanence and egolessness is a blessing for all of us. It gives you a new perspective to observe the entire truth of life in the universe. At the same time, it is also a great medicine to end our pain. The purpose of understanding impermanence and egolessness is to apply it to daily life, as well as to practice extinguishing painful emotions effectively. So, specifically, how do we practice? For example, think back. Is it not true that every time you are sick, you think, I am so uncomfortable. I feel pain. Why am I suffering so much? When I recover, I will definitely practice and maintain my health. Pay attention to the expressions of our words, body, and mind in this situation. It is sinking into pain and full of manifestations of ego clinging. Another story is that of a monk who accidentally cut his finger and it bled. But the monk immediately told himself that ego clinging is really very strong in this situation. This is the right way to deal with it. When all painful and negative emotions arise, tell yourself that this is ego clinging. This physical body is not really me, and everything is impermanent, self is egoless. However, this does not mean that we should understand that this body is not me, so I do not need to solve the problem. On the contrary, because you understand that you are egoless, you will let go of ego clinging, meaning that you do not cling to the fears and pains of the present moment that your ego thinks are real. It will help you perceive things objectively and calmly, handle things quickly, and not become more panicked. When you first approach and practice this philosophy, it may be difficult for you to directly experience egolessness, but we can start by reminding ourselves every day that everything is egoless. Just repeat that small act of contemplation regularly. It will help you be calm in the face of all difficulties. Besides, ending suffering also has another sacred mission: to help you realize that yourself and all things are interdependent and closely related to each other. Building up a fortress of ego clinging and drawing clear boundaries with others is really useless. From there, you will be able to care, be more compassionate, and be more harmonious with the outside world. This is also the most important purpose in this book, to make you understand that where the next flower will bloom, when the flower blooms, you will meet Buddha. Recognizing impermanence and egolessness is to let you know that flowers will always bloom sequentially, even when you are suffering. You are bullied, you run out of money, your business project fails, your lover treats you badly, your health is getting worse, your loved ones pass away, and so on. All suffering is always a normal state. If you can see this as an opportunity to understand the nature of all things, then perhaps a life full of insecurities is an opportunity for you to be freed. We can end suffering from within suffering itself. From within the pain, we will see the flowers bloom. When the flowers bloom, you will meet Buddha. This is a metaphor for the fact that you will be completely enlightened, to be able to live a meaningful, complete life and return to yourself. Flowers bloom, wisdom will open. With wisdom leading the way, you will have the right actions. So, what kind of action is considered right? How should we live and practice? Let's go to a very important section next. Enlightenment. Only Bodhicitta can bloom flowers of peace. Khenpo Tsultrim Gyamtso Rinpoche suggests that, when you first start on the path of enlightenment, if egolessness is not easy to understand, then we can start with cause and effect. If we can summarize the belief of Buddhism in one sentence, it is the belief in cause and effect. In this world, everything follows the law of cause and effect. That is, nothing happens without a reason. Everything has a specific interrelationship. When these causes and conditions are complete, there will definitely be a result. In the Diamond Sutra, it is said that each word, action, and thought we have has corresponding consequences. The consequences of some actions will appear quickly, while others will have to wait a long time to show up. We need to know that everything in this world is an illusion, but the one thing that is never an illusion is cause and effect. If the consequences of an action do not ripen in this life, and you do nothing to prevent it, then it will definitely ripen in the next life, or the life after that. Therefore, not all the experiences we have now are the result of what we created in this present life, but some may also be the result of a cause that was sown in a previous life. No matter how much time passes, cause and effect will not automatically disappear. If you have tried your best now, and life still has insecurities and sorrows, then you need to know that it is the result of the previous causes that you have sown, which are now reacting. And when a cause has been sown in the past, then there is no way to change it. What you can change is your actions in the present. Let's sow good causes and conditions from right now. From the philosophy of cause and effect, simply put, in a practical way, if you don't want to feel pain, give up thoughts and actions that bring suffering. If you want to be happy, cultivate thoughts and perform actions that bring happiness. That is sowing good causes and conditions. But here, specifically, how should you sow those seeds so that the flowers of peace and true happiness will bloom? The author says that the best way is to generate bodhicitta. When talking about bodhicitta, many people immediately think of goodness, specifically doing charity work, donating, and so on. However, is that really enough? In reality, there are people who spend money on charity to soothe the hidden corners in their hearts, donate a lot but are still ignorant of ego, so it is also useless. The most important enlightenment to have bodhicitta is to understand egolessness and cause and effect. Only when you understand this clearly can your soul be freer than ever before. You will not open your heart of compassion for any purpose for ego clinging. In other words, you will no longer perform acts of kindness with conditions. At the same time, you will automatically see that there are still many people in the world who are suffering needlessly, because they do not know about egolessness and cause and effect, so they are constantly creating bad karma. From there, you will not help but want to help them end suffering and achieve happiness. And this is what it truly means to generate bodhicitta. Next, we need to fully understand what is a person with bodhicitta. Bodhicitta is a concept built on 4 hearts, called the 4 immeasurables: loving kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity. A person who can truly develop bodhicitta is someone who can practice these 4 hearts. The first heart is loving kindness. This is the heart that hopes that all people, all sentient beings, will be happy and peaceful. Cultivating loving kindness means cultivating the ability to love, learning how to treat others with sincerity, kindness, and harmony with the outside world. For ordinary people, treating everyone equally from the beginning is very difficult, because everyone is born in the material world and nurtured to develop a selfish mind towards others. Therefore, the best way to practice is to start with yourself first, that is, to treat yourself with loving kindness, to love yourself, and to help yourself be happy. Based on that happiness, gradually extend that kindness to the people we love, our relatives, friends, strangers, and even to the people we hate. But we need to pay attention. Being kind to ourselves does not mean pampering ourselves, because pampering will only make us more and more disrespectful to ourselves, and it will not make you feel happier. In addition, developing loving kindness toward ourselves means understanding ourselves gently and observing our own arrogance, ignorance, cruelty, and rigidity with a sense of humor. After all, these stubborn things are just a game created by our minds. Once you understand the gameplay behind this game, you will gradually no longer be confused, insecure, and controlled by it. By becoming an observer of your own behavior and emotions, you will gradually know what kind of behavior brings happiness, what kind of behavior causes suffering, and will no longer unintentionally hurt others. Next, the second mind is compassion. Compassion means that you feel the suffering in a more gentle and powerful way. When you have learned how to maintain awareness of suffering, you will begin to observe the inner emotional changes and your own reactions. You see the fear, hurt, and resentment within you. But now, with a heart as open as possible, you will have a deep understanding of the root cause of suffering. From there, you will not look at the suffering of other sentient beings with alienation, but on the contrary, you will be able to empathize. The foundation of compassion is equality. Never take the attitude of a superior, or someone who is stronger to pity those who are facing difficult circumstances. You will find that when you develop compassion, you can easily feel all the pain and misfortune of others. When seeing scenes of suffering, you will not turn your head away immediately. Within the scope of your own ability, you will feel the pain of others, and at the same time readily help them. The third is joy, which means being grateful for your life and circumstances. In Tibet, the first step in traditional Buddhist education is to cherish and be truly grateful for everything that happens to yourself. With a joyful heart that comes from gratitude, from contentment, it will allow you to naturally focus and cherish everything you are doing. And finally, there is equanimity, which means being open enough to accept everything. When a person can see beyond the familiarity of likes and dislikes, he can treat all sentient beings naturally and equally, tolerating all without any prejudice. This is called the mind of immeasurable equanimity. However, we need to note that although this book speaks of loving kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity separately, in fact these 4 immeasurable hearts are not independent, but they surround and interpenetrate each other. Remember the saying, the gift is a rose, leaving its fragrance on the hand. Developing bodhicitta is so that you can give and try your best to help others, so that the poor can escape poverty, so that the sick can be cared for, the ignorant can be awakened, and the despised can feel respected. You will see that when you are compassionate and giving easily, you will not want to cling to anything, and will stop focusing on yourself, in order to help others better. The more you can help others, the more you overcome your own limitations. In the end, you will be completely awake, clearly seeing the impermanence, egolessness, and the responsiveness of cause and effect. That is a cycle. The flower continues to bloom, making you more and more enlightened, going the right path home. You will be surprised. With each step of this journey, the flower has bloomed, and with the bloom, you have seen Buddha. So, finally, when should you start taking action? How long do you need to practice to see the flowers bloom? Perhaps, when seeing this sentence, many people will guess what I will say next, that the time to start acting is right now. But alongside that thought, within you may be another voice, making you want to ignore and delay practicing. It says, there's still a long time. It's okay to do it slowly. If you have thoughts like that, then let's first listen to a Buddhist story. In the middle of the boundless ocean, there is a piece of wood drifting with the waves. On this floating piece of wood, there is a hole. At the bottom of the ocean, there is a blind turtle that only comes up once every 100 years. But how lucky, with what small probability that, this time, the turtle just came up and immediately fell into the hole on that piece of wood. This story is an allusion to the fact that the chance for us to have a physical body, just like the blind turtle, drifting in the deep ocean, is truly extremely low. Buddhist philosophy believes that, in reincarnation, obtaining a human body is just a flash of lightning. A human body is difficult to obtain, but now we have it, we have heard the Dharma that is difficult to hear, so let's cherish the time to cultivate ourselves and live well in this life. We need to know that the purpose of understanding suffering, impermanence, and egolessness, and sowing good seeds, is not a game of intelligence. If you only consider those truths as a treasure of knowledge in your mind, without practicing right now, without cherishing every day to cultivate in a short human life, then it's like a patient treating the doctor's prescription as a commodity, not taking the medicine as prescribed to get well. You will never be able to be at peace with suffering, will forever be like a blind turtle drowning in the ocean of ignorance. There is a saying that, people cannot rely on understanding and knowledge to grow up, we can only grow up by feeling through each practice. Others can do everything for you, but they cannot take your place in feeling. Others can use medicine for you, but cannot heal you. So, don't just listen, act right now. Stop drinking salt water to quench your thirst. Because your mind is insecure, you have spent your whole life trying to build a wall between yourself and the outside world. That wall is to help you feel secure and safe from all the changes of impermanence. In reality, this desire will only disappoint you again and again because it is a paradox. If happiness comes from outside, then the impermanence of the outside things you pursue is also full of insecurity, fear, and suffering. The more you try to chase after it, it is no different than drinking salt water to quench your thirst. Long-lasting and true happiness and peace cannot be found from the outside. Hopefully, the sharing through today's book will help you better understand some basic philosophies, which are also the core of Buddhism, so that you realize that only when you clearly see the nature of all things in life can you truly become the one who steers your own life. The Buddha's philosophy on the true meaning of life is like a lamp in the long night, illuminating the path of liberation for countless travelers, including both you and me. Due to arrogance, confusion, stubbornness, and fear, we have missed many opportunities. Up until today, although we don't know how to cherish them yet, there are still people holding the lamp of wisdom of the Buddha, waiting in the endless night to light your way forward. And those are people like Khenpo Tsultrim Gyamtso Rinpoche, like Thich Nhat Hanh, Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, and many other Zen masters, spiritual teachers, and other guides. They are telling you that, if we truly understand impermanence, egolessness, the law of cause and effect, and if we are always aware of ego-clinging, sowing good causes, and developing bodhicitta, then your life will be a very graceful journey. When you walk, the flowers will bloom. Thank you for listening. If you found this video useful, please share it with those who need it. Give me a like, click the subscribe button, and turn on the notification bell to receive notifications when I post the latest videos each week. Once again, thank you, and see you in the next videos. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel to support me and look forward to my next videos. Goodbye and see you soon.